Hello, everyone. We are going to do kind of a funky little cascading event again here on this one. It's going to make things look a little weird, but I'm kind of trying things out, seeing how things work. So far, I think the best camera for catching the full quality is... That's kind of funky how none of them are pointing exactly the right. Anyway, is the 4K there. Of course, the better lighting it gets, the better picture quality it takes. The next is probably the laptop camera, which is what would be on your bottom. Let's go ahead and actually pull that up. Ready, set, bloop. This is what I'm looking at. So, like I said, 4K is up in that top corner. That top corner. There we go. And then the laptop is down in this bottom corner. And then the main one you see is my conference camera, which we use for games and... sheesh. Sorry about that. Games and things like that. So today what we're on is we are on Jim Butcher's Small Favor. This one is book 10 of the Dresden Files. And we happen to be on chapter 23. So let's go ahead and get started here. And whilst I'm starting and getting all ready, if you guys would like, subscribe and share, and grab your copies of the books, let's go ahead here and get started. People started screaming. I reached for the amulet around my neck and drew it forth as I directed an effort of will at it to call forth light in the darkness. And nothing happened. I'd have stared at my amulet if I could have seen it. I couldn't believe that it wasn't working. I shook the necklace, cursed at it, and raised it again, forcing more of my will into the amulet. It flickered with blue-white sparks for a moment. And that was it. Mouse let out a louder snarl, and one I hear only when he's identified a real threat. Something's close. My heart jumped up hard enough to bounce off the roof of my mouth. I can't call a light, I said, my voice high and thin. A zipper let out a high-pitched whine in the dark next to me, and the steel rasped against steel, then rang like a gently struck bell. Father, Michael's voice murmured gently, we need your help. White light exploded from the sword. About a dozen things crouching within 3 or 4 yards of us started screaming. I'd never seen anything like them before. They were maybe 5 feet tall, but squat and thick, with less rubbery-looking muscles. They were built more or less along the lines of baboons, somewhere between pure quadruped and biped, with wicked-looking claws, long, ropey tails, and massive shoulders. Some of them carried crude-looking weapons, cudgels, stone-head axes, and stone-bladed knives. Their heads were ape-like and nearly skeletal. Black skin stretched tight over muscle and bone. They had ugly, almost shark-like teeth, so oversized that you could see where they were cutting their own lips, and they didn't have any eyes. Where their eyes should have been, there was nothing but blank, sunken skin. They screamed in agony as the light from Michael's sword fell on them, reeling back as if burned by a sudden flame. And if the sudden smoldering reek that filled the air was any indicator, they had been. "Harry!" Michael cried. I knew that tone of voice. I crouched as quickly as I could, as low as I could, and barely got out of the way before Amarachius swept through the space where my head had been, and slammed into the leaping form of one of the creatures that had been about to land on my back. The thing fell back away from me and landed in the floor, thrashing. Its blood erupted into blue-white fire as it spurted from the wound. I snapped my head around to stare at Amarachius. More blood sizzled on the blade of the sword, like grease on a hot skillet. Iron. These things were fairies. I'd never seen them face to face before, but I'd read descriptions of them, including when I had been boning up on my book learning to figure out the identity of the Gruffs. Given that these beasties was a fairy, there was only one thing it could be. Hobbs! I screamed at Michael as I drew the gun from my coat pocket. They're Hobbs! After that, I didn't have time to talk. A couple of the Hobbs around us had recovered enough from the shock of sudden exposure to light to fling themselves forward. Mouse let out his deep-chested battle roar and collided with one of them in midair. They went down in a tangle of thrashing limbs and flashing teeth. The next Hob leapt over at me, stone knife in its knobby hand. I slipped aside from the line of his jump and pistol whipped him with the barrel of the heavy revolver. The steel smashed into the Hob's eyeless faces, scorching flesh and shattered teeth. The Hob screamed in pain as it flew by, crashing into one of its fellows. "In nomine," Michael bellowed. I felt his shoulder blades hit mine, and the light from the great sword bobbed and flashed, flowed by another scream from the Hob's throat. The Hob wrestled with the Mouse, slammed the huge dog to the floor, and rose up above him, baring its fang. I took a step toward it, jammed the revolver into its face, and screamed, "Get off my dog!" and started pulling the trigger. I wasn't sure what would hurt the Hob more, the bullets or the muted flashes of light from the discharge. Either way, it recoiled so hard that it flung itself completely off of Mouse, who came to his feet, still full of fight. I grabbed him by the collar and hauled him back with me until I felt Michael at my back again. The Hobbs withdrew to the shadows, but I could still hear them all around us. As bright as Michael's sword was, I should have been able to see the ceiling far overhead, but it spread out for only 20 feet or so. Far enough to keep the Hobbs from leaping onto us in a single bound, but not much more than that. I could hear screams still, drifting through the interior of the station. I heard a gun go off, something smaller than my .44. The rapid shots of panic fire. Whoever was panicking was presumably shooting blindly into the dark. Hell's bells. This is going to turn into a real mess if I didn't do something, and fast. "We've got to get out in the open," I said, thinking out loud. "Michael, head for the ticketing counter." "Can't you clear the way?" Michael asked. "I can cover you." "I can't see in this crap," I said. "And there are other people in here. If I start tossing power around, I could kill somebody." "Then stay close," Michael said. He moved out at a stalk, sword held high over his head, ready to sweep down on top of anything stupid enough to come leaping at him. We went over 2 dead Hobbs, both of them covered in blue flames that gave off barely any light, but consumed the bodies with vicarious rapidity. I heard a scuffle of claws on the floor and shouted a wordless cry. Michael pivoted smoothly as the Hob, armed with a pair of stone axes, rushed into the light of the holy sword. The dark fairy flung one of his axes at Michael. On the way, my friend slapped it aside with a contemptuous flick of his sword, and met the Hob with a horizontal slash that shattered its second axe and split open its torso all the way back to its crooked spine. The Hob dropped, spewing flame, and Michael kicked its failing body back into its companions, scattering them for a moment and gaining us another 20 feet. "Nice," I said, keeping close, trying to watch the bobbing shadows all around us. "You've been working out. You look good." Michael's teeth flashed in a quick smile. "Wouldn't speaking give these creatures a means of He broke off as Amarachius flicked in front of my face, deflecting a tumbling stone knife. Targeting us? He continued. Me and my big mouth. I shut up the rest of the way to the ticketing counter. I led Michael around behind it, and all but tripped over the form of a wounded man in a business suit. He let out a choked scream of pain and clutched at the bloodied cloth over his lower leg. There was a broken shard of a stone blade still protruding from the man's leg. Harry, Michael said, keep moving. They're gathering for a rush. Okay, I said. I knelt down by the wounded businessman and said, come on, buddy. This is no place to be sitting around. I grabbed him underneath the arms and started backpedaling down the counter. There's a doorway back here somewhere. Goes to the rear area. Perfect, Michael said. I can hold that for as long as you need. The wounded man struggled to help me, but mostly all he did was make it harder to move him. He was making continuous sounds of terror and pain. I was glad that we had the barrier of the counter between us and the encroaching Hobbs. It didn't particularly care to find out what getting hit with a sharp stone axe felt like. We reached the door behind the ticketing counter, which was closed. Jiggled the handle, but it was apparently locked. I didn't have time for this crap. I lifted my right hand and focused one of the energy rings I wore. There was one of them on each finger, a band made of 3 rings woven into a braid. The rings stored energy, saving back a little every time I moved my arm, and allowing me to unleash that stored energy all in one spot. I brought my will to bear on the door as I lifted my hand in a closed fist, focusing the energy of the rings into a small area as I could. I hadn't designed them for this kind of work. They'd been made to shove things roughly away from me before they could rip my face off. But I didn't have time to waste putting together something neater. So I aimed as best I could, triggered the ring, and watched it rip the doorknob and lock and the plate they were mounted in right out of the door, and send them tumbling into the room beyond. Unimpeded by any of those pesky metal security fittings, the door swung inward. Come on, I said to Michael, seizing the wounded man again. Mouse, lead the way. My dog padded through the doorway, crouched low, and with his teeth bared. I practically walked on his tail as I came in behind him, and Michael was all but treading on the wounded man's bloodied leg. As the light from Amarachius illuminated the room we entered, it revealed the harried customer service rep we'd seen a few times before. She knelt on the floor, crucifix in hand, her head bowed as she frantically recited a prayer. As the light fell over her, she blinked and looked up. The white fire of the holy sword painted the tar-streaked on her face silver as her mouth dropped open in an expression of shock and stunned joy. She looked down at her crucifix and back up at him again. Michael took a quick glance around the room, smiled at the woman, and said, Of course, he's here. Of course, he listens. He paused, then admitted, Granted, he doesn't always answer quite this quickly. There were other people in the room. The customers she'd been trying to find a hotel room for. When things had gone dark and scary, she had somehow rounded them up and gotten them into the room. That took a lot more moxie than most people had. I also noted that she had been kneeling between the customers and the doorway. I liked her already. Carol, I said, sharply enough to make her tug her gaze from Michael, who now stood in the doorway, holy sword in hand. Carol, I need you to give me a hand here. She blinked and then nodded jerkily and rose. She helped me drag the wounded man over to where the others were seated against the wall. How did you know my name? She stammered. Are you two angels? I sighed and tapped a finger on the name tag she wore. I'm sure as hell not, I said. I jerked my head at Michael, though he's about as close to one as you're ever likely to see. Don't be ridiculous, Harry, Michael said. I'm just a... He broke off and ducked. Something solid whizzed past him and slammed a hole the size of my head into the drywall above us. Bits of dust rained down, and frightened people cried out. Michael slammed the door shut, but without, any of those pesky metal security fittings. It swung open again. He slammed it closed and leaned one shoulder against it, panting. Something struck the door with a heavy thump. Then there was silence. I ripped open the man's wounded pant leg. Along the seam, the knife had hit him in the calf, and there was a bloody mess, but it could have been worse. "Leave it in," I told Carol, "and make sure he stays still. That's close to some big veins, and I don't want to open them trying to take it out. Stay close to him, and keep him from trying to take it out. Okay?" Yes, all right," Carol said. She blinked her eyes at me several times. "I don't understand what's happening." "Me either," I responded. I rose and went to stand beside Michael. "Those things are quite a bit stronger than I," he said in a low rumble that the people behind us couldn't hear. "If they rush this door, I won't be able to hold it shut." "I'm not sure they will," I said. "But you're here." "I don't think they're after me," I said. "If they were, they wouldn't be going after everyone else, too." Michael frowned at me. "But you said they were fairies." "They are," I said. "But I don't think this was supposed to be a hit. There are too many of them for that. This is a full-blown assault." Michael grimaced. "Then there are people in danger. They need our help." "And they're going to get it," I said. "Listen, Hobbs can't stand the light, any kind of light. It burns them, and it can kill them. That's why they called up this Merc before they came in." "Merc?" "It's a matter from the Never Never. Think of it as cellophane filter, only instead of being around a light, it is spread all through the air. That's why we couldn't see the light from my amulet, and that's why the muzzle flash from my gun was so muted. And that's how we're going to take them out." "We get rid of the Merc?" Michael said, nodding. "Exactly," I said. I racked my fingers back through my hair and started fumbling through my pockets to see what I had on me. Not much. I keep a small collection of handy wizarding gear in the voluminous pockets of my duster. But the pockets of my winter coat contained nothing but a stick of chalk, 2 ketchup packages from Burger King, and a Fury lint-coated Tic Tac. "Okay," I said. "Let me think a minute." Something slammed into the other side of the door and shoved Michael's work boots a good 18 inches across the floor. A claw flashed through the opening at me, and I got out of the way, but the sleeve of my coat didn't. The Hobbs claws ripped 3 neat slits in the fabric. Michael lifted Amarachius in one hand and drove its blazing length through the sturdy door. The Hobbs screamed and pulled away. Michael slammed the door shut again and jerked the weapon clear. Dark blood sizzled on the holy blade. "I don't mean to rush you," he said calmly, "but I don't think we have a minute." Yikes! That's kind of scary. I wonder what's going to happen to them. They are in the middle of a room, trying to hold a door shut that doesn't have any of its metal thingies holding it in place. And they are being attacked by Hobbs. That is kind of scary. But let's go ahead and we will take a look next time to see how Dresden gets them out of this. In the meantime, hopefully you guys had time to like, subscribe, and share. And I want to thank you for everything you guys do. And you have a wonderful, wonderful, and blessed day.